We're here now on the top of Kuf Yud Amid Beis, and we're on line 4. And we're talking about zugos. But Ma'arav and Eretz Yisrael lo kapti azuge. They weren't makpid to avoid zugos. And they were not subject to the danger of zugos. Perhaps because their Tanoim were on such a high level, they weren't afraid of zugos, and that became a tradition through the generations, or perhaps because Eretz Yisrael is suffused with the power of holiness and purity of Shechina. However, Avdimi Minarda, now we're in Bavel, Kapid, he was so makpid and careful and scared of zugos, afilu aroshma dechavita. He had barrels of wine that he would sell, and they would cut incisions into the barrel, and they did that in order to indicate how much weight or volume, I should say, was in the barrel. Let's say, for example, every charita would indicate an ephah. So if you want to know how many ephahs or whatever it is, and you would make sure that the number of charitos would always come out to be odd and not even, and it shouldn't be zugos. And perhaps since it's chavetz shel yayin, it's got beverages in it. Therefore, there's a problem of zugos. Now, I don't know if you take 2 socks and put it on your 2 feet. I don't know if that's a problem of zugos, because that's not food stuff. What I said to you before, that maybe tefillin, maybe that's not even an issue of zugos or shtei luchos habris, because that's not an ochel. Here, although we're talking about a barrel and we're counting charitos on the barrel and we're avoiding the even number, that could be because it's wine that's being sold. I don't know. Havi uvda, there was a situation in which accidentally, inadvertently, they had made rishimos, these charitos, in even numbers, and poka chavita, and the chavis broke. So we see that in Narda, Rav Dimi had to be very, very careful about zugos and the power of destruction inherent in zugos. Now, I'm not sure what number of charitim they had, because you remember before we learned in the name of Rav Papa that 2 is much more dangerous than 4. In the case of 2, it's bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid. I assume this case that we're dealing with is a shogeg. He says arba is b'mezid in b'shogeg lo. Again, unless somebody did this deliberately and he knew that he was calculating the number 4. Otherwise, I have to assume that here the calculation was only 2. They had originally planned 3, but it ended up with 2. So called it copied by David. The Gemara says that the reason why Rav Dimi, when he was selling these wines, his barrel busted as a result of zugos is because Rav Dimi was super makbid about zugos. And the impact and the power of zugos to destroy is commensurate to how much you're makbid about zugos. The more you care about avoiding zugos, the more you're nervous and uptight about zugos, the more power you give to the zugos. Uda low kapid, if somebody is not so makbid about zugos, low kapti ba'dei, the mazikim don't see that person as someone that they want to attack. In other words, they're interested in a kind of a face-to-face confrontation, a battle against those who are battling them, who are trying to avoid them, and not give them the life that they want. They want those zugos. And if they're avoiding zugos, then in an occasion where they do go zugos, we're going to get them. We're going to zap them. Because they're makbid. And this could be the basis for our leniency with regard to zugos today, because we're not makbid on zugos. We're not afraid of the impact of two. So if I give you two apples, you don't blink about it. You eat the two apples. He also Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Omar, he said he made the following statement about the mazikin. He said they are makbid on zugos b'shtei beitzim, 2 eggs, shtei agozim, 2 walnuts, shtei kishuyim, 2 zucchinis, vidavar ach. And there's something else that they're very makbid about. But we don't know what that davar acher is. Halach l'Moshe miSinai. And everything that I told you, Rav Dimi, is halach l'Moshe miSinai. Now, what does that mean? We just finished saying that in Eretz Yisrael they weren't careful about zugos. If there's halacha Moshe miSinai about zugos, why weren't they careful about 2 eggs and 2 nuts and something else, two kitruyim? He says, "Shaloch Moshe miSinai nemer al tnai." That within halacha Moshe miSinai there was a condition that if they're makpid, then they give power to the zugos. But in Eretz Yisrael, they weren't makpid. However, the Tiferes Yisrael, super commentator of Mishnayos in Yuma, he writes that what it says here in the Gemara, halacha Moshe miSinai lav dafka. Hakavana davar chazak ke halacha Moshe miSinai. The Gemara is using the phrase halacha Moshe miSinai as like a hyperbole to indicate how dangerous it could be. We don't know what this davar ach, the 4th category, Rav Dimi was not able to reveal it to us. He didn't know what it was. And therefore, every case of zugos is included in the possibility of davar acher. So we saw, for example, cups of wine. We have to worry that maybe wine was the 4th thing on the list where there's a kapeda of zugos, a danger of zugos. And that which said in the name of the Amoraim, back on Omen Aleph, we learned the Asara, or Tmaya, or B'shisa, B'arbaim, Hemichum Zuge. Right, these numbers don't have zugos because the number right before them is Litova. So, right, the number, or Asara is a whole new count, but in the case of Tmaya, the number before that is 7, is Shalom, and we said Shisa. Each one of these numbers has a number that corresponds to a bracha in the Birchas Kohen. Is Lo Amoron, when do we say there are no zugos? That's only Linyan Mazikin. Of a Linyan Kshafin, if there are women who are sorceresses, Afilu Tuva, even if it's more than 10, Nami Chayshim. We always have to be worried about these machshefos. Ki ha, like the following case. Here's a story, Ahu Gavra de Garshal de Beiseu. He divorced his wife. Honestly, I don't blame him for divorcing his wife, because we'll see that his wife was a machashefa. Not just in the not just the way we use the word a witch, she was a real witch. Osla in Saba L'Chenva, she went ahead and got remarried to a wine seller, a person who made his living selling wine. So he has a geschäft, he has a store with wine, and people come in, they taste the wine, they drink the wine, and then they buy the wine. Kol Yoma, on a daily basis, Havi Ozil V'Shos Ichamra, her ex used to come into the store of her second husband and drink wine. Now, I'm not sure why he did such a thing, and if it's halachically okay. The Trumas Hadeshin writes that if a person divorces his wife and she gets remarried, he's allowed, his first wife is allowed to enter into the house of her second husband, because the Gemara is going to prove from here that the only reason he was harmed was because of the power of the machshefa, but not because he did an avera. Others disagree with the Trumas Hadeshin. In any event, Havi ka'uvda avdale shafin. She was trying very hard to zap her first husband with kishuf. Below kamahanyule bay, and she was not successful. Mishum dahavi mizdar benafshe bizuga. He was very careful never to drink cups of wine in even numbers. But Yom Achada Ishtei Tuva, he drank too much. Below Aviyoda Kamishasa, he lost count of how many cups of wine he had drunk. Ad Shisa Avitzolil, up until the number 16, he was still clear. So he would go ahead and drink the 17th cup, Bizdar Benafshe, but Mikan V'elech Lo Havitzoyel. He was no longer sober. Well, you can imagine when he gets to 17 cups of wine, V'lo is dar benafshe. He kept drinking wine in his state of drunkenness without knowing what the cheshbon, what the calculation was. Afikte bizuga. Afikte means when they threw him out because he was drunk, he had drunk an even number of cups of wine. So now the kshafim could get a hold of him. Kiavi Ozil, when he left, Gosbe Hahutaya, he was encountered by an Arab merchant, Amalei. So that Arab said to him, Gavra Ketila Hudi Ozil Hacha. There's a dead man that came this way because the Arab realized that the kshafim were getting a hold of him. The sorcery was zapping him. Ozil Chabke Ledipka. So the man got so upset, realizing that this is a sign that he had drank zugos and now she could get him. So he went ahead and he leaned on a palm tree. He was just falling apart. He leaned on the tree. Savach Dikla, the tree all of a sudden dried up out of sorcery. Upaka Hahu Umes. And it fell on him and he died. Omarav Avira Ka'oros Ukikros Ein Behem Mishum Zugos. Any kind of cooked food that was cooked in two different Ka'oros means utensils, or if a man ate 2 loaves of bread that were baked separately, Ein Behem Mishum and clothed the milza, Kol Shegomer B'dei Adam Ein Behem Mishum Zugos Gomer B'dei Shamayim B'miluminei. Anything that's man-made, I mean, it was completed by the act of man. Like, for example, you have cooked food that was cooked. You have bread that was baked. That's called nigmar b'asiyas b'nei adam. That's not subject to zugos. Only something that's natural, like, for example, eggs or fruits, different kinds of food stuff that is in its natural state, chayshin lezugos. And all this is based on the fact that if you remember, there was a davar acher in the transmission of Thibin, and we didn't know how to identify that davar acher. So we're always afraid that any kind of food stuff that is natural in its original raw state of being might be that third or that unidentified davar acher about which we had halacha Moshe Sinai that the mazikim are very makbid about that. So we have to be choshesh the zugos. But all this only applies to something that's nigmar b'dei shamayim. It was created up in the heavens. Now we mentioned that yayin, wine, is considered zugos. And the question is, why is wine considered nigmar b'dei shamayim? After all, we produce the wine, we take the grapes and we press the grapes and we produce wine. So the answer is, says the Tosas Rid, yayin is considered gomer b'dei shamayim. Kevin shegam ha'anovim hayotzim min ha'aretz ru'uyim lachila. The grapes themselves are edible, so therefore the yayin is considered b'dei shamayim. But in the case of bread, nobody could eat raw wheat. Even raw wheat, if you want to eat it, you have to crisp it in an oven, and therefore it's considered nigmar b'dei adam. There's no, so we can have 2 loaves of bread, and let's not get nervous about it. Gemara says chanus, if a person drinks 2 cups in a store, ein b'hem mishum zugos. Why? Because the mazikin are only makbid on what we call kvius. What you drank in a store, sometimes they offer you to taste a little of that wine. They want to interest you in buying the wine. That's not derech kvius. And if it's not derech kvius, then the mazikin are not makbid. And also, let's say a person drinks only 1 cup, and he did not intend to drink 2 cups, but nimlach, he changed his mind, and he decides now that he wants to drink a second cup. There's no tziruf between the first and the second. Sugos only applies when up front his intention was to drink 2 cups. Oreach, if a person is a guest at someone's house, he has no clue how many cups of wine they're going to bring out. So anytime they bring out another cup of wine, he's like in a state of nimlach. He didn't prepare for that cup. It's therefore ein bo mishum zugos. And Isha, in general, a woman, she doesn't have a kvias to drink X number of kosos, and every time she decides to drink another kos, it's nimlach. It's like she made a new decision. But Isha chashuvi, she is kovea shtia. She knows exactly how many cups of wine she's going to drink. Chayshinon. Then there's an issue of zugos. Rav Chinina, Bereid Rav Yeshua, ispargos. This is a kind of a refuah, and it was made of kruv, which is cabbage mixed with wine, and it was drunk for refuah. And if he drinks 2 such kotzos, it's mitzarif litova. Since it's refuah, it's considered litova. It's like had a bracha into it. The eino mitzarif l'ra. It could never be integrated into the evil of zugos. Omar Avina, Mishmei de Rava, Zuge Lechumra. If a person is in doubt and he's not sure what number he's up to, how many cups he drank, so it might be that this cup he's about to drink would be a Zugos situation, Lechumra. He should avoid drinking it because it might be mitztarif to an odd number, make it into an even number of Zugos. The imlo shasa kodem zugos, kevan shenimlach ka'es lishtos od kots lo yitztarif kots zeh la'amidom zugos. If he decides, right now I'm not going to drink any more wine because this might be mashlim l'zugos, then later on he could decide that he will drink another cup of wine because that's nimlach. And we said if he changes his mind, then there's no tziruf between the 2 cups. The Amrile, but there was another tradition in the name of Ravina and Shebeda Rava that zuge lekula. What does it mean, zuge lekula? He says the following, that he shouldn't be makbid and avoid drinking another cup lest it's going to be mashlim for an even number of zugos, because by being careful, he shows how makbid he is, how careful and how nervous, how afraid he is of the power of zugos. He is therefore investing and activating even more power in the mazikin. So therefore, better to be lakula and take it easy, laid back, and indicate that he's not going to be nervous and he's not going to be afraid of taking another cup. Because if he's going to be nervous and demonstrate his kapeda, then the mazikin are going to be activated, and they'll be makbid to get him. Omar Rav Yosef Trey de Chamra v'chad de Shikra lo mitztafi. This is a very interesting Gemara. Gemara wants to know what happens if you have 2 different beverages and you're drinking X number of kosos. Can you, let's say, drink 2 kosos of beverage X, we'll call it wine, and then drink a 3rd kos, which is beer, and that will make it into an odd number. You avoid zugos. And the Gemara says, lo mitztarif. Shechar, beer, is not mitztarif as a 3rd kos to wine. However, the opposite, Trey Shichra, he drank 2 cups of beer, and now he drinks a 3rd cup of wine, Chad de Chamra, mitztarif. It all depends on what's more chashuv. Yain is more chashuv than shecher. Therefore, if you're adding shecher to wine, shecher is on a lower level. It's inferior. It's not going to be mitzvah to the wine. It's not going to save you and spare you from zugos. But if, on the other hand, you're drinking beer, which is less chashuv, and now you drink wine, which is more chashuv, then the more chashuv is mitzvah to the less chashuv in that direction. So it's one directional. It doesn't go two directional. So again, yayin would be mitzvah to beer, to shecher, but not the opposite. Shecher would not be mitzvah to yayin, but simona. And if you want to remember this is so beautiful, then learn a Mishnah in Kalim. Kalim is a gigantic Masechet. We're now learning a Mishnah in the 27th chapter of Kalim. And the question is, there are various different Kalim that lend themselves to what's called Tumas Medris. Tumas Medris is a Tuma of a Zav, and the Zav, without having direct contact with a Medris, with some sort of a Kli, which he leans on or rests his body on, that's called a Merkav, a Meshkav, a Mochav, then there's a Tumas Medris. And Tumas Medris is a Tuma Chamura. It's like an Ava Tuma. It's Metami Odom V'Kelim. In any event, the Chachamim gave a shear of Medris for each kind of material. So you have different kinds of materials that are made up in different kelim. Like, for example, there's something called a machzeles, which is made of konim. Konim are reeds. That's not very chashuv. But then you can have something that's made of hides, or with an eye. That's considered more chashuv. And the Mishnah establishes the following. In the case of or, what's the minimum size of a, let's call it a bed or a couch that was made of hides? It's got to be 5 tfachim. In the case of a mapotz, which is a machzeles that's made of reed, some sort of a mat, there the shear is 6 tfachim by 6 tfachim. That's the minimum shear to be makabel tumas medris. And zeh klal kol hamechuber lo min hachomer mimenu tameh, min hakal mimenu tar. Let's say, for example, you have a mapotz, which the shear of which is 6 tfachim, and it's only 5 tfachim, and then you add a tefach of or, which is more chamur. And I prove it to you that it's more chamur because the shear of or is 5 tfachim. Is in such a case tameh. Now you've upgraded the mapotz to 6 tfachim because we're mitzaref, we integrate that 6 tefach of or into the 5 tfachim of konim, of reeds. But the other way around, let's say you have 4 tfachim of or, and Tumas Medris requires 5 tfachim of or, and now you machaber, you add a tefach of a mapotz made of these reeds, which are inferior, is tar. You're not mitzarif them. So same thing applies to shecher and yain, that if your third kos is shecher, then it's inferior. It's not going to be mitzarif to 2 cups of wine to undermine zugos. But if on the other hand you had 2 cups of beer, and now you add a 3rd cup of yain, you're upgrading it, and then you have the number 3. There's no scare of zugos. Omar Rav Nachman, Omar Rav, Trey Kama Kame Taika. Taika means the shulchan, which represents here the seuda. So he had 2 cups of wine before he ate the seuda. V'chada tacha, and the 3rd cup he had during the course of the seuda is mitztarfe. He doesn't have to worry about zugos. He's up to number 3. However, chad mekami taka, utreya taka. But if he drank only 1 cup of wine before the meal and 2 cups during the meal, lo mitztarfe. Why? Because there's a greater chashivas to wine that you drink in the context within the framework of the Suda, and therefore those 2 cups of wine are not mitzvah to the inferior, lower level of cup of wine that you drank before the Suda. The other way around, it is mitzvah. So that if you had 2 cups of wine before the Suda and the 3rd cup during the Suda, you're upgrading it, and that's mitzvah. It integrates it, and you're left with the number 3. There's no problem of zugos. Maskeflo Rav Mesharshi. Otu anan litkudnik taka kabinon. Are we talking about the shulchan, l'takin, meaning to protect you from zugos? L'tkune gavra be'inim. We want to protect the person from the mazikin of zugos. The gavra mitken v'koi. And the person himself is in a state of takana because he drank 3 cups. And there's no zugos here. And it doesn't matter whether he drank the cups before the Suda, during the Suda. As far as the gavra is concerned, he drank 3 cups. The Gama Kos Sheshasa Lifnei Asuda, he litorach Asuda, Sheba Ligror, the limb shall Tavasa Suda, and even the cup that came before the Suda, which you call inferior, and you in the name of Rav say, therefore it's not mitztarif to the 2 cups he drank during the Suda, it is mitztarif. It's a preparation for the Suda. And it's a gavra who's drinking 3, and he holds on to number 3, and that protects him from zugos. And the cup that he drank before the Suda is stimulating his appetite. This is something you may remember that we saw at the beginning of this chapter, this beginning of our Pesachim, that Rava used to drink on Erev Pesach wine in order to stimulate his appetite. The Gemara adds the following: the Kuli Alm, everybody agrees, whether it's Rav or Rav Misharshia, Trei Ataka, if he drinks 2 cups within the context of his meal, and after he finishes the Suda, he decides to drink another cup, lo mitzarfi. This kus is not a continuation of the Suda. He's already completed his Suda. And I'll prove it to you, ki ahi maisa, we found a story in Bamitzia Daf Pevav, the Rabba Bar Nachmeni. They gave him 2 cups, and they removed the table to indicate that the meal had ended. And all of a sudden, his parts of his face, turned sour because he realized that he had drunk 2 cups, and now he was vulnerable to the attack of the zugo. So he told them, please immediately bring back the table so that now my Suda will continue and I can drink another kos and add a 3rd kos to the 2 kos that I drank. And then he was fine and he was protected from the mazik. So we see clearly that the fact that Rabbah required of them, please bring back the table so we can continue our Suda. Otherwise, he could have drunk a cup of wine outside the context of Suda, but that wouldn't have solved his problem and it wouldn't have been integrated into the 2 kosses that he drank during the Suda. Rabbi Yehuda B'Shmuel, Kol HaMozug Mitztaref. If, let's say, you drink a cup of diluted wine and then you drink another beverage other than wine, but it's also mozug, it's also diluted, right? Let's say, for example, we have, you can buy concentrated apple juice, orange juice, pomegranate juice, and then you add water and so on, you dilute it. So that is the same status as the wine that's diluted, and the fact that they're both mozug is mitzarif them together to undermine zugos. On the other hand, it could create zugos, so it could go both directions. It could be l'tova l'ra. But the reason why mitzarif is because they're both mozug. And the Gemara now on Daf Kuf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, tells us there's an exception to that rule, chutz min hamayin, which means that if you mix cold water and hot water together, that's not called mozug. It's mayim with mayim. And it's not part of the tziruv, of the counting of how many cups he drank. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu mayim, even if you drink water that is diluted, meaning a mixture of hot and cold, that's also called mazug, and that's also included in the counting of zugos. Rav Papa said that which Rabbi Yochanan said that mayim, if it's mazug, it's also considered enough for cost that it integrates into the number. Lo amar ella chamibi lego kriri. He pours hot water into cold water, or alternatively, kriri lego chamimi. He pours a cold water into hot water. Aval chamimi go chamimi kriri go krire lo mitzaref. If he has two hot cups of water and he mixes them together, that's not called mazug, and that would not be mitzaref. Or 2 cups of cold water. It's got to be cold and hot in either direction. Okay, then, so here's where we'll stop on the top of Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amin Aleph. Good to see you back, Dr. David. Thank you so much.